Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Ask the Expert session. We're pleased to be joined by Laura Godfrey-Isaacs, and I will hand over to Laura to introduce herself in today's session.
Hi, morning everyone. My name's Laura. My background is in the arts, but I also retrained quite late in life to be a midwife, and I'm a community midwife working in London. Because of my background, I came to put this project together, Maternal Journal, about 7 years ago. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, the sort of power of journaling, how it can be a tool for you within your sort of toolbox to help process what's going on, also to explore all sorts of emotions, sometimes also to try get away from things that might be bothering you as a distraction, getting you into flow state, connecting with your creativity. I actually have a personal experience of having cancer myself. I've had breast cancer twice and had a double mastectomy as a result 4 years ago. And also as a community midwife, I've supported a woman through a pregnancy and then birth when she had breast cancer and had a lumpectomy during that time. So I've also had some experience personally and professionally with this whole area. Though having said that, I'm very aware that everyone's experience is unique to them and individual to them. So I'm not trying to universalize my own, but just to let you know that I empathize perhaps in a different way because of those experiences. And I really hope that what we're going to look at today will be of some help to you. My first slide is Welcome to Maternal Journal. So this is the movement that I started, as I said, a few years ago. And it's actually now become a sort of global movement. I'm a sort of main producer, but we have here pictured this lovely group of mums who are the founding mothers of the project, who took part in our first ever pilot project. And initially the project was around supporting mental health and being through pregnancy, birth, and the first year of motherhood. But it's grown as a movement because we've developed this format for journaling and we've put it out there on our website. Our format is freely available for people to take up. So we have lots of people now, group leaders, who have set up their own groups all over the world, actually. And we've got lots of people that have created guides for us as well. So hopefully it's something that you can connect with. Most of our resources are free and it will be helpful to you, as it is for many other people who are going through challenges during their journey. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background about what is journaling, because it's maybe something that some people understand, other people, it's maybe a new concept to them, but you may be more familiar with the idea of keeping a diary or other forms of regular practice, like keeping a sketchbook, if you're into sort of drawing, or even like a scrapbook some people like to keep. So journaling really is a term that kind of embodies any of those practices. It's a regular practice where you're in a way using it as a form to document what's going on in your life. It's a space where you can explore what's happening in your life, process those things. And sometimes also it's a kind of a space for yourself. It's your own private space. And you can see here on the top right-hand corner, this was an exhibition of some of the journals from our first pilot group. And you can see the whole sort of range of practices there. So there's obviously people writing, there's people drawing, there's people sticking things into the book. So again, we do tend to see journaling as this very open practice. And hopefully by using some of our resources, you find the way that suits you best. Because some people obviously are naturally drawn to writing more, or they're more visual. Sometimes they've had certain ways of being creative. Someone's been negative about that, perhaps in their childhood. And so they've thought they can't do that. But actually, when they get introduced to it, they realize, actually, that really works for me. So it's hopefully through engagement with what we offer, you can explore your creativity and find ways of journaling that suit you. And I always like to show this image, and it's really, you'll see it on the front of our website, and it's a kind of a signature image for the movement. And it was created by one of those first mums that was in our pilot group, by Hannah. And she was actually in her third pregnancy, which she was finding very challenging when she came to the group. And this was an image that she'd had taken by a friend when she was pregnant with her second child. And she brought it to the group, and then she worked on top of it. And what I think is really powerful about this image is it shows this whole range of emotions that I think everybody goes through in their pregnancies, in their parenting journeys, but particularly if you're facing other challenges or additional challenges to the ones that perhaps are always there about that transition to motherhood and the physical and psychological aspects. So on the left-hand side, there are clouds and the rain, and those are maybe some of the darker moments. But on the right-hand side is the sun and these kind of more hopeful moments or moments of light. And I think that this runs true for everybody, that whatever you're going through, however dark that is, however dark the clouds are, and however there are times when you're going to feel perhaps overwhelmed by that darkness, there are still going to be points of light. And it's trying to maybe see that whole picture that can be helpful. This is another image I like to show, and it's actually from my own journal. So journaling can be a practice that I think everyone can benefit from. So we do encourage, for example, anyone that's running a group to actually journal themselves, and professionals to journal themselves. And I think sometimes that's also expressive of some of the barriers that we have, again, to creativity. Maybe we think, oh, I'm coping well, so I don't need anything else, or I'm not a creative person. The way that I get rid of those emotions that I'm finding difficult is to exercise or dancing or gardening or talking to a friend. All those are great strategies, obviously. But I think creativity is a kind of a fundamental aspect of our sort of human nature. And so I think giving yourself permission to do that wherever you are in your life and whatever's going on and whatever position you've taken or whatever your past history is, I think creativity can really be a powerful thing. So this particular page was in response to one of our journaling guides, and it was about one of my experiences as a mother when my second child was in the neonatal unit. So I found that was a very stressful time for me. There was a lot of uncertainty about the outcome for that child, and I felt really overwhelmed by the kind of landscape, particularly the sound landscape. So there was a lot of beeping and monitors and all this kind of stuff. I'm also thinking that for any of you that are maybe going through treatment at the moment and you are in a very sort of medicalized environment, you're in a very clinical environment where there's a lot of kind of people charting what's happening to you, and there's lots of kind of machines and beeps and clinical activities going on around you and people in uniforms and stuff. Sometimes thinking back to that time or thinking about that time and realizing, oh, actually quite a lot of the stress for me at the moment is actually the environment that I'm in, that clinical environment. So for me, this journaling guide actually helped me to process some of that trauma. So it's quite interesting that sometimes the thought that connecting with sound would help me think about that situation would never have occurred to me. But through using one of our guides that was actually about sound, it helped me revisit the experience. So I've talked a little bit already about how much we and I believe in the sort of power of creativity, but I think to think a little bit more about why that might be important when you're going through any kind of parenting journey, but particularly when you have extra challenges, is the way that creativity can help you tap into all of those kind of changes that are going on. It can help you reflect on what's happened to you. It can maybe not only help you reflect on what's happening now, but also move past it and maybe think forward, like, how will things be when I've got through this treatment? How will things be when I've got through this difficult time? And project yourself forward, use your imagination in that way. And that can provide some kind of release. Also, I think that if you want to connect with our journaling community, the Maternal Journal community, you will also find some kind of connection there and some community. So people often like to share their journaling pages on social media and tag us, or they might want to come to a group, and I'll talk a little bit about a group if that's something you're interested in, where you can actually share with a group of people what's going on and get that psychosocial support from. And I put here something about challenging cultural stereotypes. Now, I don't know where you are at the moment with that, but I found myself when I was going through cancer that I found it really unhelpful, a lot of the kind of ways that cancer is framed culturally. So this idea of being a victim, this idea of being a survivor, this idea of fighting a disease, quite a lot of those kind of terms and those things that people often projected onto me, I didn't actually welcome and I found quite difficult. So perhaps that's another thing that you might find useful through your journaling, is actually unpacking not only what's going on for you personally, but how what's going on for you also sits within a sort of wider cultural framework, and how sometimes that can be negative or unwelcome, or sometimes it could be helpful. So those are some other things that I think can be really useful about journaling. Maternal journal really is for anyone that's going through pregnancy or birth. And I know that for Mummy Star, that's people going through pregnancy and for 1 year after the perinatal period. So obviously that's who our main sort of focus is on. And we also use very much inclusive language in that sense. We hope that this is something that we can introduce, and you'll be receptive to that, whatever perhaps your gender identity is, and also where you are on that journey, whether you've been diagnosed right at the beginning of the pregnancy or in that year after. So I talked a little bit about journaling groups. That might not be something at the moment that you feel like doing. You might prefer perhaps to be in a group with other people that are going through more specifically what you're facing. However, coming together in any kind of a group, I think, can be really beneficial in terms of getting support from that group. And often when you talk about what's happening to you, even though that might be very individual to you and not necessarily be shared specifically with anyone else in the group, I think you'll find that our journaling groups are very open to people's experiences. So on our website, you can search for groups and think about coming to a group if you'd like to. Often you'll find that people will talk about other challenges that they're going through, and often people haven't voiced that. So I think what's extraordinary is that a lot of groups that you might go to that are more focused maybe on the baby, mother and baby groups, you'll find that sometimes people aren't very open about what's going on, and they feel they have to put on this face and this mask that everything's fine. But actually in our groups, we find it's a very safe space where people can really open up about what's happening, and that can be very powerful to actually be heard, to be acknowledged. And sometimes you might find other people in the group actually have had that experience, unbeknown to you. What we use are journaling guides. There's about 80 journaling guides that we've commissioned from lots of different people, from artists, from poets, from midwives, from therapists, from people in our community. And really, our journaling guides are there to hold your hand and take you through this creative activity. So they tend to be very simple. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute, step by step or bullet points, so that it really gets over that kind of fear of the blank page. Because I think a lot of people feel this sort of fear of this kind of starting something, or this kind of this blank page. How do I start being creative? How do I start exploring an experience? And that's why we've created these guides that give you step by step a way to explore your experience or to be creative. So this is not how they look, but I'm going to show you some examples in a minute. This is a guide which I think might be quite relevant to you guys. It's called The A to Z of Self-Care. It's made by this fantastic writer, Laura Godfrey, who actually wrote a very powerful account of her experiences of going through psychosis with her first child and being in a mother-baby unit. And she wrote this amazing, kind of very honest and open account of it. And so we asked her to create a guide for us. And she talks about this A to Z of self-care, which you can approach in lots of different ways. So you might say, you might take the whole alphabet and you might think really globally about all the things that help you get through your day and help you at this particular moment get through tough times. So that might be something like your coffee in the morning, talking to a friend, but because it's quite a long exercise, you'll start to realize more and more what those things are, not just the obvious things, perhaps things that you take for granted or things that you'd forgotten people do for you or you do for yourself. Another approach can be that you take one letter. So here she's taken C, and on the left is crumpets. So, you know, she's quite humorous. So she also throws in some sort of funny things there, which you might find as well. So she's put this little thing about how much help we all need because it's such a shock having a baby and it's so much to deal with. And obviously when you've got a cancer diagnosis, you've not only got all of those normal things, inverted commas, you've also got very much additional challenges going on. So even more, how we look after ourselves is really important. So this exercise might help you reflect on those things. And also look at areas where, oh, actually, that's something that really does help me. So I need to make more time to do that because that really helps me. So it's a way of examining your experience. This is another guide that was created by, so Henny Beaumont, she's a cartoonist and a writer. And actually during the pandemic, we put a big call out and we got lots and lots of new ideas and we created lots and lots of new guides, and Henny's was part of that. So she was thinking at the time about how it was such a weird time because this idea of touch had become so different. We weren't able to be in touch with people in the same way. We literally weren't allowed to touch people physically. So her exercise was you get this spread of a newspaper or a magazine, and in this cartoon way, you bring everybody together and you create this montage of figures and actually make everybody touch and be together. And I think that her guide also is really powerful now and at any time, because it goes to that point of how isolating it can be being a new parent. And I think that's even more when you're going through an illness or you're going through treatment, where you become obviously embroiled in all of this new stuff that you have to learn and understand, and appointments and dealing with the consequences of your treatment. And that can actually be quite isolating because you maybe have to step out of your normal life, or sometimes people fade away because they find it difficult for whatever reasons of their own, or you aren't in your same routines and so you lose touch with people. So I think this kind of exercise could be really powerful in this situation, where you think about who are the people that are really important to me. How do I need to get in touch with those people? Do I need to tell people how I'm feeling, tell people that I'm feeling isolated, talk about that, and try to bring people back into my life so that they can support me. So however that works out for you, I think this particular exercise actually as an example could be quite powerful at this point. So this is another exercise that is looking a little bit at both of those aspects, this idea of support circles. So this is by Dawn Dupre, who's an artist and also a psychotherapist. So her approach is more visual, and she takes this quite diagrammatic form. So she's thinking about these kind of concentric circles, you in the middle, or you could even put the most important person in the middle. She talks about what are the things around you that really are holding you, that are keeping you feeling safe, that are supporting you. And for some people, this kind of visual representation of that might be more appropriate. It's a really nice exercise to do. She talks about what makes you feel protected and comforted, your friends, your family, your daily routines. Create a visual map to remind yourself of all the places you found support since becoming a parent, or you could do it since your diagnosis or since you started your treatment, for example. So this is actually more how our actual guides look if you wanted to access them on our website or in our book. So you can see the sort of step-by-step nature. On the left is using poetry. So this is actually about thinking about your child, how you chose your child's name. There's 3 stages there. This is one by Nikesh Shukla, who's a writer, and he asks you to look at photographs on your phone and then write about what happened. So for this exercise, you might find a picture of what was it like before you had the diagnosis, and talk about that, and talk about maybe your hopes and desires for your future. And then maybe there's a picture of you after your diagnosis. So that could also be quite an interesting reflection for you to think about how things have changed, how your perspective has changed, for example. And those ones before were what we call our mini guides, so they're much quicker. And these are examples of some of our longer guides. So within our resources, we do have categories so that you might be drawn to poetry, you might be drawn to writing, you might be drawn to more visual practices. We use a lot of collage actually, which is a really nice technique where you use cut up paper and found bits of paper and stick them in, and that can be a really relaxing and fun activity. But we also categorize them in terms of time. So we're really aware that busy parents, and particularly if you're having treatment even more, your life is going to be absolutely jam-packed. Finding time for yourself, finding time to be creative can be really difficult. So quite a lot of our guides, we suggest they're 5 minutes, they're 10 minutes. So hopefully if you get yourself a nice exercise book, you pick up in a pound shop or a stationery shop, or it could be more of like an arty journal like this one. if you keep that with you, so get one that's not too big, like this one, you can pop it in your bag, you can have it with you at all times, maybe a little pencil case or something with a few pens and things like that. Then maybe if you find a few minutes, it might even be during your treatment, that you can get out your journal and you can follow one of our guides on your phone. You can find the website and find all the guides on the phone. Or if you start to develop your own journaling practice, you don't need to be following the guides. You can just be journaling however you want in your book. Other people also like to journal on their phone. And that's certainly something I totally understand is more practical or more familiar for some people. So we're hoping actually to develop an app eventually, but even without that, you can just get a note up on your phone and you can be writing during treatment, whenever, maybe you're resting in bed after treatment, or whatever your circumstances, you're on the bus somewhere, you can get your phone out and you can be writing some things. You can take a picture, put it into your photos thing, and you can write on top of it as well. So there's lots of ways also of quickly capturing how you're feeling, capturing some images that you want to save with your phone, as well as having your journal in your bag and available. You don't need a special space to do journaling. You don't need a studio. You don't even need proper art materials. If you've got children, their art materials will be absolutely fine. Coloured felt tips, crayons, a biro even would be enough. You can do it at the kitchen table, you can do it in bed, you can do it on the bus, you can do it in hospital, wherever you want. I just want to talk a little bit, just a bit of background also about journaling. I think it can be quite interesting and powerful to think about that history, particularly of feminist journaling, and how if you start journaling, you're part of that. So historically, really, before women, had more access to being like professional writers or poets or journalists, keeping a diary or a journal was a kind of acceptable way to write, particularly, and to talk about their lives and express social and political views. So you'll find that someone like on the right hand side here, Ida B. Wells, who was an American suffragist and diarist, her diary, her journal, she wrote it with the mind of it being published. So a lot of women's diaries and journals were published in a way that maybe if they'd written a novel or a piece of nonfiction, it wouldn't have been. And so it has this kind of powerful history in that way. But it's also a practice that a lot of famous and amazing writers, women writers, have used. So on the left here is Virginia Woolf, a really famous writer from the 20th century. She wrote that famous essay, A Rib of One's Own, where she talked about what women needed to be creative. And she kept a diary for most of her life. And she talked about the diary, the journal, as being this kind of respite space for her. It was a space where she didn't feel so bound by the kind of conventions of writing. She didn't worry so much about the sort of formal aspects of her writing. She could be playful. She didn't have to scrutinize what she was writing. And I think that's a really interesting sort of indication of how journaling, diary keeping can be the space where you can really let rip. You can really be yourself. You don't have to worry about necessarily anybody reading it. You can keep it completely private to yourself. You don't need to be worrying, about how well it's written, how well it's drawn, anything like that. It's the space where you can be really free and really, in a way, it's a dialogue with yourself. And I think writers like her really recognize that. So I think there's these kind of two interesting aspects to journaling. One is the way that it can be this really open kind of dialogue with yourself in a really free, open and sort of raw way, perhaps. And on the right hand side, it can also be a political and important kind of social document. Whatever you're going through at the moment, you might want to share that with other people, and other people might really benefit from that at some stage, either just privately showing it to other people, or if you want to, making it public on social media. I'm not saying that's what is expected at all. I'm just saying there are these kind of two aspects to journaling that are quite interesting to consider. And that's really explored in this situation, where this is actually the sketchbook of Frida Kahlo, probably an artist you've heard of, very famous artist now, almost like a brand in herself. Now, she had this amazing career as an artist and as a revolutionary. Actually, she was a very powerful figure in her own time, but also she kept this private sketchbook. So she didn't want anyone to look at this sketchbook. It was where she talked about what was going on very much in her personal life. And you can see here, used images and text on top. So that's another sort of way of thinking about how not only do we necessarily have to choose one form, we can combine many forms together within the journal. But after her death, her estate then chose to publish her diary. So I think that brings up some quite interesting questions, as I said, about whether the journal, your journal, is a private thing and who you give access to. Do you keep it completely for yourself and you keep it in a private place in your bag and you don't want to share it with anyone? Maybe you don't want to share it with people that are really close to you because it might be a space where you are really being open with yourself about what's going on with some very close people and you wouldn't want them to read that. Absolutely legitimate. Other pages or other times there might be something that you do want to share with others, but you should have control over that, not other people. So I would make sure that you say to people, if it is a hard copy journal and you do want to keep it private, that you make that clear to people you're living with and people that you don't expect them to go and have a rifle through your journal. Because of this history of women's journaling, there are quite a lot of sort of diaries on the market, particularly for teenage girls. I don't particularly like a lot of them. Are very gendered and pink and fluffy. But what's interesting is they often have little padlocks on them. So again, that sort of goes back to this idea that there's this kind of history of women keeping a diary, girls particularly. And again, that suggests that often girls have been encouraged to keep a journal through perhaps puberty or something, through these big changes. And matrescence, becoming a mother, is another one of those big changes, life changes. And so there are lots of journals on the market which give you pages and you fill things in and everything. We tend to try to advocate that you find your own way to journal through the support that we give you with the guides. But obviously, a lot of people have written about going through illness. And so it's another time when you might, as I said right at the beginning, benefit from this form of creative processing, this form of documenting what's happening to you creatively. It gives you that space to do that. Yeah, lots of people have kept diaries or journals at periods of time in their life when there's a lot of change going on, which I'm sure you're probably feeling at the moment too. And just to say that we do have some great journals, or I would say memoirs at the moment, about motherhood, which again, at the moment, because of this historical legacy of women not having so much access to being professional artists and writers, but also motherhood not being a subject that was considered to be particularly interesting or important, what we've got now is this sort of explosion of wonderful kind of accounts of motherhood, and many of them are dealing with additional aspects of that. So on the left-hand side, for example, American writer Nefertiti Austin talking about race and gender and parenting in America. On the right-hand side is a graphic novel, so using cartoon type images and text, by A.J. Summers, and their journal or their work is called Pregnant Butch. So that's about their experiences of being the sort of butch lesbian woman going through pregnancy and the sort of additional aspects of that. And then in the middle, this really powerful poetry book by a British poet, Liz Berry, The Republic of Motherhood. And that's a very visceral, physical kind of exploration of particularly birth and early motherhood. So I think we've got lists of recommendations, but I think you'll find, if you're interested, there are lots of really powerful accounts of motherhood at the moment and different people's experiences, whatever that is. And this is one of our poets who's made one of our guides, Tolu, and she's created this wonderful poetry book called Locating Strong Woman. So hopefully if you have a look through our resources, you'll find that quite a lot of people that have creative guides, you can then reference their work if you want to find out, like I was talking about Laura Godfrey-Isaacs' book, Tolu's book. So it's also might be interesting for you if you'd like to read more accounts of motherhood and different people's experiences. You can find that through our movement. I don't know what sort of support you're doing at the moment. And obviously this is a recorded session online. And as we all know from the pandemic, so much of kind of face-to-face support went to online support. And that's the same with Maternal Journal. So a lot of our groups now are running online, which actually can be really useful, I think, for people, particularly if you're going through treatment or you've got additional things going on. It's a lot harder to often get out and go to a group in person, or geographically it might not suit you. It can be too tiring, whereas doing things online can be just a little bit more manageable. So if you were interested in joining a group, for example, have a look on the website and you'll find quite a lot of groups are online, and sometimes quite a lot of those online groups are in the evening as well. So if you've got other children and they're in bed, then it's something that you can access. But what I like about this image, this is actually from a group from South America, Argentina. And what you can see is that they've all followed the same journaling guide, and yet everybody's is so different. And I think that's one of the things to remember, is that your unique creativity is absolutely individual to you. And you'll see that if you join a group, because you'll all follow the same exercise, but everyone's done something different. There might be some similarities, and there might be obviously connections in terms of what you're talking about and discussing, but nevertheless, what you've uniquely done will be absolutely individual to you. And I think that's really something to celebrate. And just a few images of people with their journals. So you can see here on the left, people are often coming to groups with the babes in arms and they're breastfeeding at the same time. And going back to what I was saying about how time poor we often are as parents, and particularly when we've got additional things going on in our lives, we all can be multitasking. So going back to what I was saying about journaling, you could be feeding a baby and with your phone writing something on your phone, or babe might go down for a quick nap and you might just think, I'm going to grab my journal, I'm going to try one of those guides in the next sort of 10 minutes and see what happens. And I think that what can happen with journaling, as much as hopefully it being at some points a way of helping you process what's going on, it can also take you away from what's going on. It can provide respite. So some of our guides are actually, they're just fun. They're like adult colouring books. So you can look at all of the guides and pick and choose the ones that you feel like doing at the time. And that can be really beneficial. If you've got a lot going on in your head, you feel like your head's going to explode with everything and everything that you're having to manage and everything. Sometimes just having 10 minutes, however long you can manage, doing something really fun and pleasurable can just help you get into a sort of flow state and just park all of that stuff for a while. And actually it can really help relieve some of that sort of tension and some of that stress. So I think, I don't want you to get the idea that all of the guides are going to take you to some deep place. Sometimes it's appropriate to actually do something creative to actually help you have some respite and have some fun and have some pleasure in your life, when maybe at that point you might feel there's very little of that. And here you can see again that sort of idea of multitasking. So there's babies on the floor. This is actually a group, obviously, babies on the floor, being quite happy, interacting with each other or toys. And then those mums, those parents there sat on the floor with their journal scribbling away. So you don't need to find always that sort of really absolutely empty space where nobody else is going to encroach. Sometimes you're just going to have to do it alongside everything else, all the chaos of family life or whatever's going on. And that's absolutely fine. That's realistic. That's pragmatic. That's what we do as women, as parents. And again, on the left with a toddler actually as well. And she's managed to create a really beautiful journal page there. And you can see that our sort of groups, we do tend to have everybody sat around a table, as well as having this kind of soft space for people to sit with their babes if they need that. But you can see again, people journaling with a baby on their lap, journaling with a baby in a wrap, others with a baby asleep in a stroller or something. So one can work around lots of situations. On the left-hand side, actually, it's one of our OTs who runs a group in a mother and baby unit. So I think that's also an indication of how, however extreme things might be for you at the moment, or you might be feeling really not in a good place, journaling can be a really good tool, whatever the circumstances. So within the sort of maternal journal movement, we have people working, as I say, in mother and baby units where people are going through particularly mental health, very powerful experiences and difficulties. And then we have groups running in the community where they're very open to people irrespective of their situations. I think it can be a tool, whatever's going on. So just some nice really quotes here, talking about pregnancy and parenthood being such a big change, losing your identity. And I think that can be the same when you're going through illness as well, that particularly when you're perhaps in a hospital gown or you're in a clinical situation, you can feel like you've become a patient and you've lost your identity. So I think maybe something like this in your private space, your creativity is a space where you can retain your sense of identity and record what's going on for you and feel like you're not disappearing into down this kind of clinical route. And as she says, Lizzie, journaling is an effective way to explore the challenges, experiences, and new identities found along the way. So again, whatever's going on, I think that can help you in those ways. And again, someone here is talking about being introduced to the artist. We hope that by connecting with your own creativity and then connecting to this wider network of creative women, it can be inspiring for you. Their work can be inspiring for you. You might find some books on our list. Maybe you've got to go in for some treatment or something, and actually you're going to find some books as well that you can be reading and be inspired by while you're in the waiting area or while you're recovering from something. That hopefully also can bring sort of other tools into your life at this point that might be helpful or enjoyable. And just to let you know that we do have a book if you're interested, and that's particularly geared towards individual journaling, which might be, as I say, perhaps the most appropriate for you at the moment. We've got lots of our exercises, our guides in there. As I say, we've got quite a lot of contributions from artists involved, which again, we hope would be inspiring for you, and a little bit more about sort of the history of women's journaling. That's available on Amazon or any other book platform if you're interested to get yourself a copy. And we also have a podcast, so that could be something also that you listen to when you're in treatment or you're recovering or you're in a waiting area. That's on all of the podcast platforms. So we put this program together last year of 10 conversations with writers. So it's like some of those people that I've been talking about that have created guides for us. So then I'm in conversation with them about how they journal, the benefits for them, particularly around their mental health and well-being. And then they also talk through the guide that they've created. So hopefully, if you listen to that, you will be entertained and interested by what they're saying. And then also you could try one of their journaling guides when they talk it through at the end of the episode. And I was just going to put this slide up because this is a guide that I often use when I'm doing training for professionals that are going to set up maternal journal groups, or when I'm doing a session with people, like a taster session. So I thought if you want to, you could just take a picture of this on the screen and try it. So just a quick way that you could have a go at one of our guides. So My Amazing Hands, you draw around your hand and then you write and draw, if you want to, everything that your amazing hands do every day. And then you can start putting other elements around the hand. So these are just two examples of people's responses to the guide. But it tends to be a really illuminating guide because you start with thinking about, oh yeah, all the things I've done for myself and others. And I often say, think about what you did this morning. So people go, oh yeah, I got my kids up for school, and then I got ready myself, and then I had to look after the dog, and then and all of that stuff. And then people start going a bit deeper and they start thinking more symbolically about holding a child's hand, or wiping away a tear, or stroking someone, or patting someone that's distressed, or again, holding a hand when you're walking along the road to keep someone safe. And then people have also talked about looking at their hands, and some people are really look after their hands. It's very important to them with cream, and they like to have their nails. Other people, you look at cuts and things, and it's about all the work that you've been doing. Sometimes we talk about also how we use our hands so much now for communication. We've got our phone in our hand all the time, and we're thumbs and we're writing to people and stuff like that. It seems like a very simple exercise, but actually it tends to be really quite deep and quite revelatory, because it often people then reflect on, wow, all that I do for other people, and maybe I don't do enough for myself, I don't do enough self-care for myself. And I think often when we're going through kind of illness or crises, our natural tendencies are to try to keep everything normal for everyone else, running around like a mad person, trying to, if you've got other children or other people you're responsible, keeping it normal for them. And then it's almost not thinking about yourself, not projecting anything, but that's what I think I did myself a bit, that I had children when I was going through my cancer treatment, and I was just like desperate for them to not be too traumatized and upset, and so I was trying to keep everything the same for them, and then almost just like on autopilot for myself. So I've often found when I've done this exercise with people, that's what comes up for them, though all sorts of other things have come up as well. So yeah, if you want to have a go, maybe just take a picture on your phone and have a go at this one and just see how you find it. So yeah, just a big thank you for listening. And just to say that you can connect with our resources. If you visit the Maternal Journal website, you'll find lots and lots of resources there. And also you can follow us on social media. We're actually Maternal JRNL because someone else had taken the full thing. And then if you're interested in the book, you can just search for that. And similarly, you can search for the podcast on whatever platform you use.